McDonald's Compliance, by USER13APH. So, once upon a time, I was a McDonald's employee. They always put me on drive-through because I was white and spoke fluent English. Yes, that's pertinent. Literally everyone was Hispanic and only like 2 people besides me spoke fluent English. So, I always winged it when greeting customers, and they always liked me. They'd ask about me when I was off, give me little gifts for brightening their day, etc. My manager came to me one day with a script and demanded I spoke from it. I repeatedly did not use it. And eventually she got frustrated and threatened me with a write-up if I didn't read from it. Here comes the malicious compliance. There was a typo in the script that referred to McDonald's as McDonald's. So, I'd repeatedly say it, and because everyone has a headset, they'd all hear it, and the staff would chuckle because most could read English, and they all got the script. My manager was not amused. She told me that I needed to say McDonald's. And I reminded her that she demanded I read from the script exactly what it says. I got sent home that day and they cut my hours. I still feel like I won. Boss says I should quit because I like spending time on hobbies, so I did, by user_anecdotist135. I was working for a startup engineering firm working as a piping design engineer. But since it was a startup firm, we didn't have a lot of manpower and the ones we had weren't as qualified either. I was one of the very few qualified enough to handle a team of my own. The boss trusted me with almost everything. I was like the second in command after the boss only because I was managing a lot of things on the side as a voluntary basis. Things like paycheck balancing, client meetings, quality assurance, documentation, and other stuff which he should have hired someone else to do. I was good at it and he took full advantage of it by giving me things to do that never was under my job description. One day he had this bright idea that we should revamp our website to attract more clients. And he gave this project to his nephew who just graduated from college as a developer of sorts. After a week or so the nephew came up with the first draft of the website and the boss was fairly disappointed as it didn't look anywhere near to what he expected. He then called me in and asked me if I knew anything about website design. At that time I was very much interested on UI/UX and was doing an online course to learn about it more. So I told him that I'll see what I can do. I spent the next week full making a proper information architecture, wireframes, and color guidelines that the nephew could pick up and build the website from scratch. In the end the website looked futuristic and the boss was pretty happy. But during the week my other responsibilities were put in a backlog and it just kept piling on. I knew I would be able to cover it once I'm done with the website and didn't pay too much attention to it. The next week my boss caught up with backlog and called me into his cabin. He started yelling at me for all the responsibilities that I didn't attend to. I calmly told him that I was working on the website and it's not a big deal. Told him that I would clear it out as soon as possible. But he wasn't happy. He asked me why I spent so much time doing something that isn't even my responsibility. I told him that I was learning about UI/UX and was pretty much interested to learn more. I obviously never thought about pursuing it as a career because frankly I was a mechanical engineer by qualification and didn't think jumping to IT would be easy. The boss snapped and told me that I should quit and pursue my hobby as a living. He said that only then I will understand how lucky I am to have a job that pays. I kind of got offended because 1. He doesn't even pay me the worth of things I do for the company and 2. He knew I could cover and yet took this as an opportunity to discipline me. I stepped out of this cabin, went to my desk and put in my resignation and went home. He called me a couple of times, asked me to revoke my resignation and then made other people from the organization call me to convince me to come back. I wasn't having it at all. It's been 2 years now. I decided to pursue UI/UX as a career now and am working as a product designer in one of the biggest organizations in the country with a pay that's almost 300% more than what I was getting as a mechanical engineer. Update 1. To all the people who wanted to know the company status today, the company was shut down because they had to pay a huge penalty for not being able to deliver the last project I was handling. Then COVID hit and they had to reduce pay for all the other staff, which led to people leaving. Eventually the company went bankrupt for not being able to keep up financially after COVID. Update 2. For all the people who want to know the steps I pursued to have a career in UI/UX, I did the online certification course from Google and spent a lot of time solving whiteboard challenges preparing myself to be a problem solver. Then I got the opportunity to intern for a service-based agency for a few months where I dedicated my time to learn as much as possible, and then when I was ready, I applied to all the openings I found on LinkedIn and other job portals until I finally landed a job with this tech unicorn startup. While I was working as an intern, I also invested in a bootcamp certificate course from an organization called Design Boat in India and also some certificate course from Interaction Design Foundation. Hope I was helpful, but if you still need to talk, hit me up on chat, I will surely help you. They refused me an office, I complied, they regretted it, by user intrepid she. I got my first grown-up job while I was finishing my bachelor's degree. I was just getting started in a highly technical and emerging field. Very few people back then were doing this kind of work, and I seemed to have an aptitude for it, which is probably why I got a job before I had any credentials. The department I was hired for was brand new and had the potential to take customers from other departments, while also generating net new business. Interestingly, the other departments had been offered the opportunity to start the service themselves but refused, even actively trying to prevent it from happening. That's the reason I ended up in a malicious compliance situation. The leaders of all the other departments conspired to prevent me from getting an office. I didn't understand at first because at that age I didn't imagine professionals did petty, immature things. When I realized what was happening, I knew they'd get exposed if I went along with it. So I happily did my job wherever I could find a place, which often ended up being in the mailroom, where lots of people would notice. I hoped maybe the leaders would start to feel guilty or annoyed and change their minds. Or, they'd be caught by their bosses. Either way, problem solved for me without a fight. Little did I know how well it would go. I started to be well liked by a lot of the leaders because I helped them with their computers. There was one leader who still inexplicably hated me. I never spoke with him, not even one word. But he continued to insist I did not need an office. I wasn't even the level of a secretary, according to him, which I took to be a dig at my lack of a degree. I heard about him saying that from a friend who was in the meeting when they talked about changing their minds. It's too bad for them they didn't change their minds, because the president came through the mailroom multiple times and finally stopped, clearly annoyed. Why don't you work in your office? That was my golden moment. I had complied politely with not having an office. I sweetly told the president, I don't have an office. What? Why not? There isn't room. No space available. According to whom? Mr. So-and-so. But you've been working here for, what, 3 months? They could have found space for you by now. Oh, the president was beet red at that point. I just smiled and said my understanding is there is no space. The president literally stomped upstairs to the offices of Mr. So-and-so. I distinctly heard the yelling from downstairs. People outside probably heard it. The president came and brought me upstairs to the conference room where the leaders were all seated looking down. There was a pile of keys on the table. I was afraid at that point. Was she having me pick someone's office to take? While that might have been sweet revenge, it wouldn't have been good for my working relationships with any of them. But no. She handed me a key to the conference room and said, "This is your office." She scooped up the rest of the keys, which I learned later were all their copies of the key to the conference room, and said, "Your office is the largest office on campus. Even bigger than mine. Enjoy." And she walked out. That was probably the best drop the mic moment I've ever seen in my life. And the story ends with my compliance not only winning me that office, but all the other leaders, except Mr. So-and-so, becoming great colleagues. Edit follow-up. I mentioned in the comments there was another chapter to this story that I guess sort of puts a bow on it. One sunny day about 6 months later, Mr. So-and-so passed me on the stairs outside the building. I was leaving and said good morning to him. We were the only 2 people, or so I thought. I wouldn't pass by a coworker like that without a polite greeting. I was in my office quietly analyzing some data about an hour later when the once again a furiously red-faced president stormed into my office. I swear she was 12 feet tall in her anger. She demanded, "What is going on between you and Mr. So-and-so?" My heart was racing at probably 150 beats per minute and I couldn't comprehend her question. "What do you mean, what's going on? I have no idea what you're talking about." I started to imagine she was accusing me of having a relationship with the man. And just, ew. She said she wanted to know why he just said what he said about me. I was flummoxed. "I'm sorry, I still have no idea what you're talking about. I never have more than a greeting to say good morning worth of conversation with Mr. So-and-so. I can't think of anything whatsoever he would have to say about me." She told me that my sibling had just burst into her office raging about Mr. So-and-so. Turns out when I walked by him and continued on, the next person he encountered was my sibling, but he didn't know that. We both worked for the same company, but I was married and we had different last names. If he bothered to get to know me at all, he would have known that. He walked right up to my sibling and said, "There goes a B&C# with her head up her A and dot." He assumed, I guess, that everyone else hated me too. He barely knew my brother but felt comfortable saying that. So, my brother walked right into the president's office, interrupting a meeting, and repeated what Mr. So-and-so said. The president assumed I was aware. But my brother hadn't gotten to me yet. And I didn't realize just how much Mr. So-and-so hated me. I told the president I genuinely didn't believe it was really about me. It couldn't be because we never spoke. It had to be about what I represented, which was a major change to the organization. She walked to his office. Then more yelling ensued. Pretty soon they were back in my office. He apologized and I repeated what I told the president, that I didn't believe it was really about me. Mr. So-and-so agreed. Later on I had a project with him and he started to trust me. We ended up being able to work together with no further issues. Husband complies with wife's demand, by Useroy8825. My favorite example of malicious compliance happened about 10 years ago. I'm a dentist and one Saturday morning I got a call on my cell from an older patient of mine. "We are closed on the weekends. Doc, I've got a tooth that's just killing me," he said. I told him I lived just 10 minutes down the road, so why doesn't he come on in and I'd see if I could get him out of pain at least. "Nah doc," he replied, "I've got some Jack Daniels here and I'm doing just fine. My wife told me I had to call you, so I did. I'll call your office Monday morning and see you then." Then he hung up. Still one of my favorite patients and favorite story to tell. "You want me to work at full capacity? No problem. Can you tell my colleagues to say goodbye to their bonuses? Thanks, by user look better than you. I work in a help desk call center as a first-line agent, on purpose. My job is easy. We work from home where users can call/email/chat us and we fix their most basic computer problems, often resolved by a restart or a redeployment of some sort. I took this job on purpose to get away from a very stressful career that killed my social life, and frankly my will to live. This job costs me exactly zero energy, giving me the space and energy to have the social life I've always dreamed of. The pay in this job is based on the languages you provide help in, and because of my language skills, and a promotion I'm not allowed to tell my colleagues about, I make more than anyone else in my team. For this simple reason I refuse to take any promotions that bring more stress but are not financially compensated, causing me to have worked in first line for 3,5 years now while most of my colleagues have had promotions. Because this company has a huge turnover, I often get new colleagues/managers. I usually train the new colleagues and have a friendly, cordial relationship with the managers, but I always try to stay private and reserved as much as possible to save all my energy for after-work activities. Most days I don't talk to anyone. I log in, I work on the tickets/calls/emails for 50% of the time, whilst studying/reading, watching movies, or listening to music the rest of the time. What's important to know for this story is that we can get a bonus of up to 10% of our monthly income depending on our productivity. I always get the 10%, but for some newer colleagues it's difficult because the limits are pretty high. If I like a colleague, I will sometimes help them by closing tickets in their name. I also usually take the more challenging tickets and leave the easier ones for the newer team members. Further bit of information is that the company I work for has their help desk for 12 languages, so to cover all the languages we have a team of 8. So now to the malicious compliance. One of the people I trained became the new team leader, which I actually encouraged. The guy is exactly the manager type and understands the job. Unfortunately, the pressure from the operations manager, OM, got to him and he started checking our stats, noticing that for about 4 hours per day there is no activity from me. I explained to him that this is on purpose to give everyone a chance to get their bonus and that my output is still higher than anyone else in the team. He also noticed that I sometimes close tickets in my colleague's name for which I couldn't give him the real reason cause it's a sort of fraud. I just told him I rush sometimes and just don't notice. He told me no more relaxing times, and no more closing tickets in others' names. He actually said he would be checking up on me to make sure I work the full 8 hours I'm paid for. I explained to him that this was a very bad idea, that the team is doing really well and the current status quo is perfectly balanced and he shouldn't upset it, but he was young and reckless. Fine. For the next 2 months I worked at full capacity. Where normally there was a good balance of closing tickets and everyone getting a fair shot at their bonus, now all of a sudden I did about 70% of the work, leaving very little for my colleagues who, except for one other, both months didn't qualify for their bonuses, causing huge conflicts in the team. I tried to stay out of it but was soon accused of stealing all my colleagues' tickets and not giving them a chance to earn their bonuses. I replied professionally to all the accusations via email, making sure to CC all relevant managers, including the OM. After the 2 months, our new team leader was reassigned and the status quo returned as it was.